All right. Hello, everybody. I am Jayme CheeseSlice, the engineer and producer of Uncontrolled Opposition. Welcome to the show today, where we have a return guest, Charlotte Dennett. She's going to be talking about Iran and energy crisis and all that kind of fun stuff. She was the author of Follow the Pipelines, and we talked to her about that book in our previous visit. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Gloria and Jayme, the hosts of Uncontrolled Opposition.
Hey,
How you
Jayme.
guys
Hey,
doing?
Jeremy.
Okay. And for the viewers at home, if this is your first time watching the show here on YouTube, just so you know, this is a radio program first and foremost. We're recording it here live and you get to see it uncut instead of just doing it behind the scenes, because why not? And sometimes we have extra content that doesn't make it into the radio show. So that's what you need to know as a viewer. And now we'll bring on Charlotte. Say hello to her. Hello.
Hey, Charlotte.
Hey there.
Welcome
Good
back.
to see you
Thanks.
again. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Gloria. She's going to do her monologue, and we're going to kick off the show. We're going to record for about an hour, and then see what goes on from there. All right, let's do it.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jayme Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guest, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Today, we welcome back Charlotte Dennett, an investigative journalist and author focused on oil, politics, intelligence, and U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. Her February 20th article, Deception and Dangerous Endgames, published in Counterpunch on February 24th, questioned the intent behind repeated Trump-Netanyahu meetings on Iran's nuclear program. And the article was prophetic. Charlotte suggested the diplomacy was largely performative, going through the motions while military buildup pointed to escalation for control of Iran's vast oil and gas reserves. She compared it to the January 2026 U.S. abduction of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and the First Lady for oil leverage, and drew from her own 1970s visit to Iran under the Shah, witnessing repression and protester killings. She considers regime change via the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi, a dangerous myth that ignores the brutality of his father's secret police. Most now see the February 2026 Geneva nuclear talks as nothing more than a deception to buy time. Talks ended without breakthrough by February 27th. On February 28th, the next day, Israel launched strikes, killing the Ayatollah Khomeini and destroying other key installations. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, this confirmed that negotiations weren't the goal, but preparation for an attempted regime change war. Now let's say what you aren't getting from corporate news. The conflict has spiraled disastrously. Millions rally for Iran's government against intervention. Iran's retaliation has pierced Israel's Iron Dome with drones and missiles, causing civilian deaths and damage. Unconfirmed reports claim Mossad headquarters was hit and that Netanyahu is dead. While it's denied, rumors of deep fakes abound. The Straits of Hormuz stay closed, crippling oil flows. The USS Abraham Lincoln damaged and retreating. The Gerald Ford suffering fires, allegedly in the laundry area, and floods from clogged toilets. Was the ship hit by Iran, or was this sabotage? Ex-users wonder about the loss of 600 beds. Are aircraft carriers dinosaurs? Iran has also struck and blinded key radar systems across the region, destroying or severely damaging high-value U.S. early warning and missile defense radars in Qatar, Jordan, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait. Lastly, Iran has struck a key LNG gas terminal in Qatar and Saudi oil facilities. The loss of THAAD has severely degraded surveillance, missile defense, and forced U.S. reliance on airborne assets. Israel faces such heavy losses that talk of the Samson option, nuclear last resort, grows louder in desperation. This echoes Dennett's 2022 book, Follow the Pipelines, probing her father's 1949 spy death amid oil rivalries and how big oil intelligence drives endless conflicts. Thank you. Charlotte, please explain your family history, why you have focused on Iran and pipelines, and where do you see this conflict going?
Wow. That was a great introduction, Gloria. Good work.
Thanks.
Really. So my father was America's first master spy in the Middle East. He was recruited into the OSS in 1943. He had been teaching students at Clark University, which was specializing in international relations. And he was valued because he had this enormous knowledge of the Middle East. And he had gotten that from teaching at the American University of Beirut in the 30s. And it was a situation that greatly touched and influenced him. So he knew the language. He was taught Arabic by a Druze chieftain, going through the Quran. And so this influenced him deeply. Anyway, when he was recruited and he had to write an analysis of work for the CIA, which I got declassified, I sued the CIA. And when I got the first declassified document, it was heavily redacted, but there was one line that they missed, and that was, we must control the oil at all costs. What he was referring to was Saudi oil. And his last mission was to go to Saudi Arabia and sort of scan the scene and try to determine what would be the route of the newly projected Trans-Arabian pipeline. This was a huge investment on the part of the U.S. It was going to carry Saudi oil across the Arabian Peninsula, and it was to terminate in one of three possible terminal points on the Eastern Mediterranean. One of them was Gaza. Another one was Haifa. The third one was Lebanon. And there was even division within the oil and pipeline companies. That was Aramco and Tapline as to which was the preferred terminal point. He favored Lebanon because there was less conflict. Because, by the way, he died in 47, not 49, but we'll get to 49 if we have time. Anyway, his considered opinion was that Lebanon was safer because there's a huge amount of conflict going on in Palestine. The Jews were fighting the Brits, and they were fighting the Arabs. So lots of conflict. And the one thing that you don't want when you're setting up a pipeline route is you don't want conflict in the area. So I think my father's job was to work with all the different factions to make sure that they were on board with this American-owned pipeline shipping oil out to Europe. And well, he died under mysterious circumstances before the pipeline was built. But I would just add quickly the 1949 date. Syria objected to the pipeline terminating in Palestine. And by the way, so did King Ibn Saud, which I find very interesting. Anyway, to get over this, that was earlier on, Saud opposition. He came around eventually. FDR convinced him. But at any rate, Syria didn't want it terminating in this new planned Jewish state in Palestine. So the Syrian president, Shakri al-Kuwatli, was overthrown in the first CIA coup. Most people think the first one was in Iran. No, It was 1949 in Syria. And who was involved in that coup? My father's replacement, for one thing, Archie Roosevelt, son of President Theodore Roosevelt, and Kermit, his brother Kermit. They were involved in the Syria coup, and they were involved in overthrowing Mossadegh in Iran in 1953. Is that a good enough introduction? I could go on and on, of course.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a fascinating history. And yeah, can you just briefly say what happened after the coup? They blocked the pipeline in Syria, uh, and then wasn't that a similar issue with Assad and the reason why? One, excuse me, one of the key reasons why the U.S. wanted to remove Hafez and Bashar al-Assad all those years.
Oh yeah, I mean it goes on and on. I mean, this is one thing that I learned that that this statement by my father, "We must control the oil at all costs," became a meme. Essentially, it was followed throughout, all the way up to the present, all the way, and yeah, get regime change, getting rid of Assad. That was over pipeline schemes. Because let's see, that was 2000, around 2011, or 2010, 2011. Assad was objecting to a proposed pipeline that was going to carry Qatar's incredibly rich natural gas and oil. Again, across the desert, it was going to go through Syria, and Syria objected. Assad objected. He objected because he knew that Russia wouldn't like that, because Russia would perceive this as a competing project. And that's another thing I find out. There are all these different bypass schemes, depending on which side you are. They're always, the big powers are always looking for different routes and getting a hold of different deposits. And the one thing that's hardly ever said, why? They're asking all these questions like, why are we going into Iran? Come on, give me a break. They all know why. It's for the oil. But more importantly, what's not said, and is obvious to any soldier, oil is the fuel of the military. There were two refueling planes that clashed and caused the death of 6 people in one of them. They were refueling planes. They got to go up there and keep refueling them to keep going. And the lessons of the big powers go back to World War II and World War I. Germany lost both wars because its whole military, its air force, its planes, its trucks, its tanks ran out of gas. Big lesson. Ever since then, the great game for oil is off and running. It's still going on. Now it's getting even more intense because, as we all know, it's natural gas that is powering the data centers that are being built for AI. So this is a really, really serious time now.
Hmm. And can you say something about Gaza and how oil, the offshore oil? I know you discussed that in your book, and that's, I mean, not discussed that often. The importance of that offshore oil in Gaza, and then maybe we can get into Iran.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was first discovered in 2000 off the coast of Gaza and Israel, and more was found in 2010. There's now $500 billion worth of oil off the shores. So you can imagine. Netanyahu has long desired to develop this oil, and also to reconnect a pipeline that had been built in the 30s, the Iraq Petroleum Company pipeline, the southern branch that was British controlled, connected to Haifa. So he had predicted at the outset of that war that the oil will soon be flowing to Israel, and he was wrong, because the person they were going to install to replace Saddam Hussein, Ahmed Shalabi, was the guy that had come up with the weapons of mass destruction pretext for going in there. So he was discredited, and they still haven't got that scheme completed. But since then, he wants to create an energy corridor that goes all the way up the Eastern Mediterranean and will tap in to all those riches. Netanyahu has prevented the Palestinians from getting their rightful share off the coast of Gaza. And meanwhile, is trying to clear out the area. As if you look at a map now of Gaza, I mean, God, it's just horrible. And you will see the whole coastal area is just rubble. And they have big plans for a pipeline scheme, a railroad scheme. I've put them in some of my Substacks. You can see the maps. The whole point is that in order to control the pipeline at all costs, you got to make sure there's no conflict. So what do? You depopulate, demilitarize, get the Palestinians out of there. That's the scheme. And it's going full hog. And now we get to Iran.
Well, and just before Iran, but it seems to be failing. I mean, they think they can just wipe them out in one fell swoop. And yet, as you point out, you can't build a pipeline when you have these perennial conflicts. And I mean, the Palestinians are not going away as much as they would like them to. So, I mean, these schemes can never be implemented. That's kind of the irony, no?
Oh, there isn't an irony, and they should know better. I mean, Trump doesn't know better. That's why he's so easily manipulated. His ignorance is so appalling. Yeah, one thing, I think the main thing that he and his backers, and I would include the tech bros who are like New Wealth, they don't have the whole history. So they think that they can just go in there and smash these people. They have no understanding of the history. There's a long history of resistance on the part of Arab people, Muslims. They were never trusted by the oil companies in the U.S. And so that was one thing that my father discerned on his last mission. The Saudi king was more influenced by the head of Aramco and would tend to deal with them more than the U.S. government. And my father started to think, gee, maybe Aramco's like the British East India Company, which was a huge colonial power. So he discerned that way back. I would call it discerning corporate control over foreign policy, which is manifest going all the way up to the present. But anyway, yeah, I forgot. I lost the thread there, Jeremy.
Oh, well, now let's get into.
Sometimes I steer off. What?
Yeah, no, those are very good points. Yeah, and yeah, now maybe let's address Iran. I mean, what is it that I guess this is the end goal. They wanted to overthrow 7 governments and entirely remake the Middle East, and Iran was last on the list.
Yeah.
So go ahead, tell us more about Iran.
Well, it was their most difficult project. Again, totally underestimating I would say the national consciousness of how the U.S. has intervened in the past, overthrew the elected leader of Iran, Mossadegh, who had nationalized the oil. So right away, if you nationalize the oil, you got to realize you're going to be a target, quite frankly. He did. They nationalized the oil and they brought in the Shah. And the Pahlavi dynasty, the Peacock throne. And the Shah then ruled all the way up to 1979. And it was a rule of terror. He was hated. By the time the revolution happened, everybody, I would say, in Iran cheered. Well, not everybody. There were some elite, Iranians who supported the Shah, did well under the Shah. But the vast majority of the people did not. And the whole, I probed this whole issue because I had been to Iran under the Shah, and I had witnessed, first of all, I saw Sabak. their hated secret police. They'd be stationed on all the street corners, surveilling the area, looking for any signs of protest or disruption. So they were widely hated. Then there would be students who would come up to me who told me that please begged me to tell the truth about life in Iran under the Shah. And the thing is, I knew I couldn't do it right away. I was writing for a magazine called the Middle East Sketch. It was Beirut based, English language. And the publisher, he just wanted me to write special issues and bring in lots of ad money. He didn't want me criticizing whatever I was writing about, which made it really tough on me. And I had developed a file called What Charlotte Couldn't Write. I couldn't write it then, but I wrote it later, and it happened with the hostage taking in 1979. And there's a story behind that, if you want to hear it, which most people don't know. It's probably
Sure,
a
go ahead.
setup.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was following it very carefully because these were diplomats being seized hostage. And my father, he was a diplomat and he was a spy. I mean, he was under State Department cover as the cultural attaché. Anyway, so I thought this is very interesting. And I wonder what the hostage families are going through. And then I found out that there were a couple of them, a few of them that were beginning to speak out. They didn't feel comfortable with how the Carter administration was handling it. The State Department had set up this thing called Family Liaison Action Group, FLAG, which was controlling what the families knew and what they could say. And so some of them got pissed off. One of them was the Graves family, and Bonnie and Lizette Graves. They got a letter from their father, who was one of the hostages, and it said, watch out for Kissinger, Rockefeller, and Helms. And they're thinking, what is this about? Then the next thing that happens is 60 Minutes actually runs a documentary on life under the Shah. And it was really revealing. And that emboldened them. They had a press conference the next day, and talked about, we got to examine our history in Iran. I don't think we're being told the full truth. So then I interviewed them. And one of the things I found out, and it's all, by the way, it's all in a issue of The Nation that came out December 13th, 1980. And I'm going to show you, this is it, but you'll have a hard, whoops. Well, that's not going to work. Anyway, you'll have a hard time finding it. And it's there's a reason you can't find it. And it's actually partly my fault, because in the early days when, all our articles were being copied electronically, we had the right to retain the copyright and not have our articles reproduced willy-nilly. And I went along with it. And that's one of the reasons why you can't find this online right now. I've tried to talk with The Nation to get it back up there. The title is Suffering in Silence. Anyway, one of the things I learned through them is that there was a scheme, and it went like this. The American embassy in Iran told headquarters back in the State Department that if the Shah was going to be admitted into the United States for medical treatment, he'd already been deposed. He supposedly had cancer. If he was going to be admitted into the U.S., that there would be a seizure of the embassy. They already knew that was going to happen. And what happened is the Carter administration ignored the warning. Why? Because he was under pressure from Kissinger, Rockefeller, and Helms. Helms was the former U.S. ambassador. And Kissinger and Rockefeller, people don't understand this, but they worked like this together. They going way back. So anyway, and David Rockefeller, the concern was that once the Shah was overthrown, the Ayatollah, who eventually came into power, was withdrawing money from Chase National banks in Europe, and particularly London. This bothered them intensely. All the Iranian oil reserves were going into, not the reserves, the profits were going into these banks. So there had to be a pretext to stop it. So what happened? The Shah was admitted into the United States. The students, as predicted, took control over the embassy. So once they took control over the embassy, then Carter put sanctions on the Iranian funds and stopped the flow of money to Iran. And to this day, they have not recovered. The Iranian people have not recovered the millions of dollars of petroleum money that was in these banks. So anyway, the people of Iran know this history. When the Shah was overthrown, many of us were just overjoyed, so happy for them. And there was a real effort on the part of more secular forces to gain control. But ultimately, it was Ayatollah Khomeini that succeeded and then had his horrible reign of terror. So the Iranian people have suffered dearly. But the one thing that they do not like is U.S. intervention. As I say, now there are some. I should walk that back a little bit. Yes, there are people who are protesting, and understandingly, I mean, the Ayatollah's regime was horrible, and so they were protesting, but part of the protests were people who wanted the Shah's son to be the new leader. And this was apparently what the Trump administration was thinking was their best option. He had left Iran with his father and mother when he was a child, and he never set foot in Iran. So now they're making him be the potential leader. It's not going to work. And this is where the appalling ignorance of Iranian history comes in, because people they have bad memories of the Shah. So that's not going to look so good. Now the hope is that, go ahead.
Well, one point of information, in my research, I uncovered that the CIA had funded the Ayatollah Khomeini and had been in communication with him when he was in exile, and that he was a preferred replacement for the Shah over candidates or rulers, whatever, that were
leftists.
that were
more.
Wait, let me just finish the sentence there, Jeremy. That were more socialist in orientation, more for the rights of the people, and they felt that with this type of ruler in place, that there would always be some issues, and they were well aware of these issues. And the whole thing is, we see in the United States also, is that the more conflict you have, the more people are unhappy, the more divisions, the easier the country is to infiltrate and control. So, this was not a candidate that necessarily the people wanted, but it was one that the United States and the CIA felt was the most reasonable one for them.
Well, there's a pattern, if I can interject. There's a book
Please.
by, and Charlotte, you probably read it, by Robert Dreyfuss, Devil's Game, How the West, our U.S. helped to arm fundamentalist Islam. And he shows how time and again the U.S. government preferred Islamists who are right-wing because they would have a more open economy. As far as leftists, the U.S. approach to foreign policy is to target the left because they want to either nationalize the oil or other resources, or adopt more, strict, higher taxation and stricter measures that would restrict foreign multinational corporations. So in the Middle East, time and again, Dreyfuss shows, and I think he has some chapters on Iran, that they tried, once they realized the Shah's day was up, and this is how the U.S. foreign policy apparatus operate. They'll support the dictator until the end. Then they realize his days are numbered, so they'll back the color revolution against him and try and get in their favorite candidate. And in the Middle East, they would prefer these more Islamist elements over the left. So I think the Iranian Revolution had Abul Bani Sadr, if I'm not correct, although I'm not an expert on that revolution, but from my understanding, he was one of the leaders of the more leftist faction and they got him out, made sure he was out. But I think from my understanding, and Charlotte, you're more the expert, so correct me, but I think over time the Islamist regime, defied the U.S. in various ways. So they pushed ultimately to overthrow it, but initially they wanted those Islamists in over the left.
The other thing that's a point of...
Go ahead, Charlotte. Why don't you comment, because you're the expert?
Well, no, just also from just personal experience. I was a reporter in Beirut in the early 70s. And this was a time of great ferment. The Palestinians had different factions functioning in Lebanon at the time, and they were all debating, geopolitical realities. And one of the things, one of the Palestinian leaders, Ghassan Kanafani, who is a poet and very much beloved by a number of people, was assassinated in his home while I was there. And this really shook up a lot of people, because this is one of the first examples of Israelis targeting, going right into, they actually got into Beirut and killed him. And then one thing I was told subsequent to that is that where do the people turn when they feel oppressed? The left was wiped out. It was during the Lebanese Civil War, which was making no sense to me, but it lasted 15 years. It went from 1975 to 1990. Ultimately, what was that all about? They're always asking, what's the scheme? What's this about? Well, it's very clear. The main thing is they wanted the Palestinians out. They wanted to get them out of Lebanon. And there was Lebanon is, the president is Christian, I might say. And at the time, the Christian Maronites were very much aligned with the U.S. So they were happy with that, to get them out. And now, of course, we've got Hezbollah in Lebanon. And as I said, where did people turn to? If the left was shattered, who they turned to? They turned to these Islamist forces like Hamas and Hezbollah. So now the attack is on to rid the place of Hezbollah. And Hezbollah was the only group, this was Shiite warriors, mostly based in the south of Lebanon. They were the only ones that were fighting the Israeli incursions. I mean, there was that horrible massacre of Sabra Shatila refugee camps, for instance. That happened later. In that case, Israel was involved, and Christian far-rightists were involved in Lebanon. So there's been this history of getting rid of the Palestinians, getting rid of the more secular forces. And like you were saying, Jeremy, well, they were more inclined to nationalize the oil. They were more educated, frankly, and more secular. And that's not what big oil wants. Big oil wants to get its profits any way it can, and it will deal with whoever it wants to achieve this goal. So now we have the situation in Iran, and we really don't know where it's going to end up. It's horrible and dangerous. Gloria, as you were mentioning, the nuclear possibility. I mean, what is Netanyahu in his effort to stay out of jail? What is he going to do? I'm sure he feels that this is the best opportunity they have with Trump in power. So they're going to go full hog into this thing. And they're going to be boots on the ground. I really fear that. It's dreadful.
There's a couple...
Go ahead, Gloria.
There's just a couple of points of information I just want to throw into the mix. I just want to be very clear with our audience that millions are defending Iran from their government, whether or not they love the Ayatollah, whether they love this fundamentalist ruler and government, they defend it. And what we're seeing on Western news is basically these the dysphoria of Iranians. And it's also a class issue. I mean, certain people in like everything is a class issue. So you're seeing, a ruling elite, who want the Shah to return, but the millions of people are supporting their government, and we are not getting that footage. And I think that's a big issue. And then the other thing I just want to say is something that really perplexed me, and I'd love everyone to comment on it, is, when I found out, I was there when there was the war between Iran and Iraq. I wasn't there, I was alert, I was a student at this time. And, I was following it. And it was really a terrifying thing, Iran and Iraq were throwing, missiles at each other. It looked terrible. And then Israel, Iran was also sending missiles. I think they were called Scuds at the time, if anyone remembers the Scuds. Iran was sending Scuds into Israel and threatening Israel and all of this. But at the same time, and behind the scenes, Israel, first of all, the U.S. was selling weapons to both Iran and Iraq. Okay, at the same time. However, to get the missiles through to Iran, they were going through Israel. So at that time, okay, that I was a student and I was scared out of my mind listening to the Ayatollah saying he's going to blow up Israel, all of this stuff. Israel was actually selling them weapons and they were buying them from Israel at the middleman. So at that point in my life, I said, gee, a lot of this geopolitics is what they tell us and what is. So we always have to kind of stand back and look at the signs. And one of the things that I said in the opening monologue is how well Iran is doing and how poorly the United States and Israel is doing. However, I just want to counter that with one thing. Somehow, even though we're getting this other news that Israel is doing terrible, they're still able to bomb the hell out of other countries. So you would think that there may be more fog of war here, because how are they able to bomb other countries? Like, if you're Israel, you would bring your troops home and you would defend your territory, or you would do more attacks on Iran. You wouldn't be putzing around with Lebanon and Syria and all this other stuff, which is what they're doing. So I'd love to have your comments on that also. And then the other thing, back to Netanyahu, I have seen some really funky stuff on Twitter X, where they're making fun of these videos that Netanyahu's putting out saying he's alive. They're showing Netanyahu with 6 fingers. They're showing Netanyahu with 2 ear canals. They're making jokes by putting the Ayatollah in that same coffee shop. They're putting, the North Korean in that coffee shop too. It's crazy. There's a lot of stuff going on, and really we cannot tell with these deep fakes. And then another thing that's just blowing up is this whole thing with aircraft carriers, where they're saying the aircraft carriers are coming out of the Gulf, and the United States is telling us, no, they're not. And then we're finding out they have these incredible fires in the laundry room, and they're having all of these floods that are just so happening. I mean, a lot of stuff we are not getting the news on. And, if you go to Twitter X, you're getting a lot of noise, a lot of things that are just fake AI and stuff like that. But you're also getting some information that totally contradicts what the US's position is. So I'm finding this incredibly curious, and turning it back to our esteemed guest and Jayme, our experts. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I saw those rumors. Interesting. I also saw on X what it purports to be scenes of massive Israeli opposition to what Netanyahu's doing. I can't confirm it. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, he's after a vision of greater Israel, which is what the far right has always had. And as for Iran, I mean, they don't mention, I find it so interesting. They'll talk about the oil in general, the ships going through Hormuz, that something that Trump either didn't know about or knew about. Either way, it looks bad for him. but at any rate, that they're not getting into the nitty gritty. Very few of them are, which is Iran has huge resources of oil and natural gas, and they are they're among the top three. And what are the top three? Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and Iran. And so if you look at it from the perspective of what big oil wants, and now it's big oil. Interesting, big oil often was sort of mostly shaped by, let us call, Rockefeller forces, which were very powerful in the 20th century, and had learned through trial and error how to rule, and to the point where they would not go into a country with a sledgehammer, like Trump did with Venezuela and with Iran. Instead, Nelson Rockefeller had this whole career in Latin America during World War II as head of coordinator of Inter-American Affairs, and it was to, work with leaders and business leaders, but do it quietly. And they were able to, as a result, they would ultimately be able to pull off coups, and there would be no accountability. The coups in Brazil in 45 and 64, they were all about trying to get a hold of Brazil's oil, but they did it through covert action, and they escaped the kind of accountability that they should have had. So now, I think, though, big oil is seeing Trump as being such a toady, so dependent on oil. He's totally dependent on them for his campaign contributions, and big independent companies like is called Continental Resources. This is a Howard Ham in Oklahoma is his biggest supporter, and it seems like they're all allied now. They desperately need more oil and natural gas for the AI revolution. So they're going to go in what may, and they'll cut deals. I think Trump would cut deals with Ayatollah people. I mean, whoever succeeds, if he can cut a deal with them, he will. He doesn't care about all those people that are being killed. He just wants to get the oil. And the one thing I picked up, and I wrote about it in my Substack, was that the infrastructure in Iran is or was much healthier than in Venezuela. Big oil was reluctant to go into Venezuela, which was embarrassing to Trump because its oil infrastructure was in disrepair. Why? Because of sanctions levied on the United States. But in Iran, it was different. So is Trump going to bomb Karg Island? I don't think he's going to bomb the oil installations, because he may want to get a hold of them at some point. This is very, very tricky, and I think he's over his head. He doesn't know. He's completely overhead, and it's turning into a disaster. The blocking of the Strait of Hormuz, I mean, it's affecting countries all over the world. They can't get their energy. Their food supplies are suffering. I mean, this is a total friggin' disaster, in my opinion. And I share your worry about the nuclear option. I mean, there's Iran wanting to build a nuclear power. Why? Because it's been attacked by the two major nuclear powers, the United States and Israel. Of course, we never talk about Israel's huge quantity of nuclear weapons. But now you got two idiots, two desperate men trying to stay out of jail. Trump on his side, Netanyahu on the other. What the hell? I mean, it's a dangerous time. What will they do in desperation?
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your earlier question, Gloria. I didn't have a pen with me, so I didn't write it
It's
down.
okay. But
And maybe with the time we have, if we can pivot to some other conflicts around the world, because your work is really important in showing how most conflicts are resource conflicts, and that's not the way they're framed in the media. And maybe you can touch on Ukraine, Russia, because a lot of the liberals are still supporting Ukraine and this great democracy, and all the stuff in the Middle East takes attention away from the billions of dollars. there have been very limited protests, and the left is largely supporting. Seeing alternative media, they're praising. This film won an Oscar that's anti-Putin, and really it's part of the propaganda offensive. So maybe you can touch on that conflict and also discuss the situation in South America and Venezuela, and Cuba, and if there's time, maybe Africa. But first, start with Ukraine and how that's a resource war at its core.
If I before I get to Ukraine, if I could just jump in for a second, Yemen. All right, I was able to find out that all this war against Yemen was to prevent the Houthis from getting control over the oil, and there had been a plan by the Saudis to build a pipeline that would avoid the Strait of Hormuz and would go down through across Yemen and terminate in the Arabian Sea that led into the Indian Sea. And that's how they're going to avoid the Strait of Hormuz. And it was called the Tapi Pipeline. And the purpose of it was to so the energy could flow south. That I got that from a State Department quote. So that's what that whole thing is about. And now the whole bottleneck of the Strait of Hormuz is, sort of proves the point. Ukraine, well, I was looking at where all the emphasis on the part of the Russians is, and that's the whole eastern Donbass region. What's not told, Ukraine has the largest amount of oil and natural gas, the second largest reserves in Europe, if you count Russia as part of Europe. Okay. And so that means that the Biden administration was interested in getting in there. Trump wants to get in there. And but the Russians, who do have a Russian population in that area, Russian speaking, they're not going to let it happen. And this is all part of the great game. That's how I see it, frankly. I see it as two superpowers, Russia and the United States, fighting over Ukraine's resources, and of course the valuable minerals that are going to feed into AI. But oil is still the numero uno objective. And you see them, by the way, every time you see that they're bombing oil installations, that's all the media says, they're bombing the fuel of the military, right? So, and then you have to, I really encourage people to look at maps. If you look at maps, I have 12 pipeline maps in my book, but it really makes sense. I mean, the Caspian Sea, for instance, has, which borders Ukraine and Russia, has huge amounts of oil and natural gas. And so does the Black Sea. Okay, so they're all scrambling. They're all trying to get oil, and I documented it all. And this is hardly ever said, right, Jeremy? I mean, you never hear the what they're really after in Ukraine. And I feel terribly for the suffering. I feel for the suffering of the Ukrainian people, and how many losses in Russia. I mean, it's just a world gone crazy. It's very sad.
Yeah, and if you can address the situation with Cuba and Venezuela and South America, and how Trump is really moving more aggressively in South America.
Well, he's going to have a problem, I perceive, because even though he thinks he's got Venezuela all sewed up, he did not overthrow that regime. And he does not have control of the military, as far as I understand. They're sort of playing, I don't know, some kind of a waiting game. Brazil next door is an ally. And this is, again, people having strong memories of interventions. Cuba, of course, Bay of Pigs. That was the effort to get rid of a communist in Cuba, and then followed by a coup in Guatemala. I mean, it's the same story. And what this world, this current 20th century world, is one in which the peoples that are being attacked have long memories. They've woken up those who didn't know. They're pretty savvy right now. They know what El Norte, the big one to the north, wants, and they're not going to give in that easily. Now, Cuba has been hurt really badly by sanctions. And now, by restricting oil to Cuba, they're in trouble. They're in deep trouble. And I don't know what's going to happen. But I can say that a lot of the continent of Latin America are not going to think kindly about this if he tries to do it. And again, you have to think of the long-term consequences, which Trump doesn't do. You go in and bomb people to smithereens, you kill their families, and you think that they're going to like you? Do you think that their future generations is going to like you? It's idiocy. And it's all driven, quite frankly, by the quest for power and control and profits. And one thing that I learned early on, the whole reason the oil connection is kept out of the strive for endless wars is what mother is going to want to send her children or her husband off to war if it's for oil profits. And that's already having an impact in the United States. I mean, there are MAGA families that don't like this. It's because they were working class people who were sent to war as cannon fodder. And they've wised up, a lot of them. So Trump's got a problem with MAGA. And with this recent defection, what's his name? I can't remember, but the national security. Yeah.
Joe Kent. And can you say something about why the AI, perhaps, one thing driving this hyper imperialism, it's not just Trump. I think there's this tendency of Trump derangement syndrome, to blame Trump on I mean, we know he's a terrible leader, but I think it's a flawed analysis that makes like, oh, this evil guy took over the government and is doing all these terrible things. It's really these structural forces, as you're pointing out. And I think you're making an interesting point that these AI centers are so energy intensive, and that's what may be driving this heightened drive for resources. So maybe just say something to explain to listeners a little more about that, and that activists should oppose this the move toward AI. So go ahead. Why does that require so much energy in oil and gas and this heightened imperialism?
Well, that's what it's about. Really, that's what it's all about. I mean, the AI thing is where it's at, right? This is why the stock market hasn't plummeted faster, in my view, because the tech bros need it. And again, because they don't understand power like the older generation did in the 20th century, led by Rockefeller, more than anyone, the Rockefeller family. But they need it. It's energy intensive. There is one possible shining light out of this, which they're discovering that solar power is now actually cheaper than oil and gas. And so solar is being built up now as an alternative to fund these AI centers, because the AI centers is where it's at. The whole world is competing on this. Everyone wants to get control and be on the front edge of this in terms of making profits. And so we'll see where it goes. But of course, there are many predictions that the bubble's going to burst because a lot of investment has been made in AI, but the returns haven't come in yet the way they'd like. And if they don't get enough of these built, a lot of these investments are probably going to go bad. So we'll see what happens. It's a dangerous time. But I don't see how protesting AI in general is going to work, because it's here. It's the new technology. It's the wave of the future. It could be very dangerous. It has to be controlled, and that would be a role for Congress to do. We don't know. The oil companies are among the major lobbyists in Congress. And so that and AIPAC for Israel. And one of the things I point out in my book with regard to Israel, by the way, its forces have been used in Latin America. All right. They were used in Guatemala, bringing in a right-wing regime, Rios de Montt. They've been used elsewhere. Track it out, because what's happened is Israel has just become the shock troops of these guys. And so this is sad. It's sad for the people of Israel. Now they're learning they're not safe. They're not safe in Israel. So there's going to be wake-up calls on that end too. I mean, if you look at the whole history, I mean, I'm going to even way back to the Balfour Declaration in 1917, and it was all about Britain supporting a Jewish homeland. But then I found even an oil connection to that. Balfour was the former foreign minister of Britain, writing a letter to Lord Rothschild, Walter Rothschild, of the huge banking and oil dynasty, and about the importance of a Jewish homeland. What it was a colonial project, putting European Jews in this absolutely crucial location on the Eastern Mediterranean so they could run a pipeline from Iraq to Palestine. This is beginning to come out. There are even Israelis looking into their own archives. Okay, start to think about that. And the first people who objected to these schemes, and also the scheme of Saudi Arabia, that's a whole nother. I can't even get into it.
I want to just take a step back as to the AI and the need for power, and let you know something that's going on even in Florida right now is they're building these production centers to develop these suitcase-sized nuclear reactors. And the goal is to put these basically suitcase-sized nuclear reactors near data centers so that they have their own power. So it's not just the solar. They're also going to do this a nuclear option. So basically, where we had issues where a giant nuclear reactor with all kinds of oversight and all kinds of stuff could go bad and you could have a meltdown, they're going to solve the problem by putting these all over the United States, wherever there's a data center. And now you're going to have all of these little time bombs just sitting there. So, and you're going to have all of this nuclear material going back and forth on our highways and roads. So, I mean, we're talking, environmental disasters left and right. And it's quite a world we've got here. And
Control at all costs. It used to be, well, it still is, control the oil at all costs. My father's words in 1943. Control the AI, the data centers. They have to be protected. That's why they're putting these nuclear things, I am assuming, next to them. They have to militarily protect them. So what a world we're off for. So yeah, that's a good point, Gloria.
Well, we're coming up to the really the end of the show, and I'd like to give Charlotte the opportunity to tell our audience how they can follow your important work.
Oh, well, thank you, Gloria. I've finally done a Substack. Okay, I'm on my 6th one now. So Charlotte Dennett /Substack.com, and you will find mine. And I've done them on Iran and in Venezuela. I've now done one on Lebanon. My book is Follow the Pipelines, Uncovering the Mystery of a Lost Spy, my father, and The Deadly Politics of the Great Game for Oil. You can get it on Amazon or through Chelsea Green or your local bookstore. My website, followthepipelines.com, and also charlottedennett.com. So that does it. And I wish I had more time, but I don't. But in my latest Substack, I talk about some of the things that my father discovered while teaching students at the AUB. And it profoundly affected him. So read my latest Substack.
Well, thank you, Charlotte, for joining us again. We have a little time later, but that wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbeam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. So we have a
Okay.
little
Well,
bit
I'm
of
gonna have to
time
run.
if
Yeah.
you want to finish any thoughts, Charlotte. And I have to
Yeah.
actually run too. They're putting gutters in. It's
Oh yeah, I get
madness,
it. So I
madness.
don't know how we have additional time, but I'll mention this, okay?
Sure.
Yeah, it's my latest Substack, which I call God Help Us If We Ever Send Troops to the Middle East. That was my father's words. That was my father's words in 42. And so I elaborate on that. But here's the interesting thing. Why did he say this? And it's because he he had to teach his students a course on how to live. It had been handed down to him, and so he talked about the subject of intolerance, and he got to, this is what I'm going to read. First, he gave some shocking examples of Christian intolerance, the Inquisition, the wars of religion, the persecution of scientists. From there, he went on to Jewish intolerance, citing from the Old Testament. So far, so good. But when he got to Muslim intolerance, he sensed restlessness in the classroom. And suddenly, one of his students got up protesting and said, toleration is a virtue that is possessed by people who don't believe or are easygoing in their faith, a virtue that only those who are rich and prosperous, strong and confident, unafraid of menaces could afford. But if you believe and your faith is challenged, if you love your country and see its independence denied, if you have ideals and see them destroyed, then you have two choices: intolerance or moral extinction. And then my father goes on, says basically, he concluded that we don't understand other cultures enough, and it behooves us to understand. And I think that is one of the huge problems in all these wars in the Middle East. There is not enough understanding of the peoples and their culture. It was something that my father was praised for. His code name was Carrot, which means jewel. And the CIA is now has told me they want to make him a model for new officers. But the problem is, uh, can they really benefit in the age of oil? It's like getting the oil trumps everything, including cultural differences, religious. It doesn't matter, but ultimately, we will pay for it. I mean, humanity's going to pay for this.
Well, what I see is that, we talk about, in different economic theories about capitalism being the iron fist and the velvet glove. And I think what we're seeing now, what I saw as a student was the velvet glove was there. I mean, there were the regime change, the covert action, all of that stuff. It's like they ripped the velvet glove right off and they're showing you the fist. And
Yeah.
and they're giving you the fist. It's a crazy situation right now. There's like no holds barred. It's like, all right, so let's just wipe out. Let's just genocide everyone. We have, I mean,
Yeah.
the elite have always been saying that there's overpopulation and that if we have this huge war in the Middle East, basically all of Africa will lose its energy, which is a huge problem. I think you could comment on that. I mean, the United States has its own reserves, but a lot of countries do not. And these are developing countries, and not having oil, like what's going on in Cuba, which is voluntary by the, not voluntary, but it's being done intentionally is the word I'm looking for, to the Cuban people by the United States. Is this thing to just really kill people left and right. So we have this huge genocide happening. We had it in Gaza. We're seeing it in Lebanon. We're seeing it in Syria. We're seeing it all over. And it's going to come. It's global at this point because of the gas and oil issues. The other thing that we're seeing is that Israel is threatening to hit the main production of Iran's oil, which is I think it's called the South Pars, right?
They've already.
Is there
Yeah.
is there
Right.
big, it's, from what I understand, it's the world's biggest natural gas field.
Yeah, and it's shared, by the way, with Qatar on the other side. And by the way, this is beginning to backfire with the Gulf nations. Have you followed that?
Yeah, I put
They're
this.
suddenly getting pissed off because now their oil
Jayme,
is.
do you have the cartoon I put up with this mail out? Jayme, are you there? I worked with AI and came up with this cartoon, which I put on the mail out.
Ironically,
Which is basically, I don't know where Jayme is at this point. Maybe he's looking for that, but but it basically shows the United States getting evicted from the Mideast, because what they're actually doing is, in striking all of these bases in the Mideast, they are really literally kicking the United States out of the Mideast. So it's quite an interesting situation.
well, I don't know if they'll succeed, but that is certainly one of the agendas, and it had all these Gulf countries. I mean, they're hosts. Oh, there you go. That's good. Yep. The eviction notice. That's very funny.
Yeah,
Well,
I made that
anyway,
with AI. AI will do anything you
well,
tell it. It's amazing.
no, that's what I'm saying. There's the irony, and by the way, it's here to stay. There's no stopping it. Okay, there are the value, the good side, and then there's the bad side. But at any rate, yeah, that's right. And now, initially all these Gulf countries, they were furious at Iran. Now they're beginning to change because their oil installations are being attacked, and people are dying, and so we'll see. There's blowback there. I mean, I would love to think that something beautiful comes out of all this, that there's a renaissance. I was really hoping that, but I'm not so sure. I don't know. Is our planet going to survive? I mean, enough people are so appalled at this, but we don't have guns. I don't know.
Well, I posted something on X. I don't know if I could find it, but basically it's, the working class in Israel and the working class in the United States are being weaponized to fight the working class in Iran. So, it's basically, one of these situations where the elite, the predator class, or the Epstein class, as we like to call them now, just sits back and just lets everybody kill each other. And, I think that is the big thing. And I just read, I was checking the news feeds a little bit, and allegedly in the aircraft carrier, the Bush, there are several sailors allegedly that are getting off in Cyprus. And basically you have a lot of people, who don't want to fight in this war. And I think that's going to continue. Because I think they're deserting. Yeah. So, I think we're going to hear more and more of that going on also.
Probably so. But again, did you see the family who lost their son in, I think it was in Kuwait? And they're saying, why are we doing this? We have no explanation why. Why did my son die? That's their biggest propaganda problem.
I think the scariest part is Trump said it. Trump said, he said, when no one's coming to help him with the Straits of Hormuz, he's saying, well, we don't really need the gas or the oil anyway. We're kind of self-sufficient. So why doesn't the other countries come and help? Wait, how can you say, on the one hand, you're saying, oh, we have to do this. It's an existential threat. We have to go and we have to bomb Iran. And then all of a sudden, a couple of days later, say, well, we don't really need the oil. Why are we doing this? I don't know. I mean, it's incredible.
He just flips every day. A new story, but the people are not stupid. They're onto it. So he's got a big problem. We'll see how it plays out.
Well, my guess on this is that he's going to have a health problem, and he's going to be removed, and then we're going to have J.D. Vance for the rest of our lives because he's Peter Thiel's protege.
He's playing a very careful game, isn't he? I don't know.
I think that's the only way J.D. Vance becomes president is if Trump steps down, because people aren't going to be happy after we start feeling the fallout from this war. And anybody from the Trump administration is not going to be welcome in the power of government when there's time for if we have an election.
He's going to try, as he's doing, do everything he can to prevent Democrats from taking power and
But they
attacking
have a
all the
real
different.
narrative problem. They don't have a good explanation for what's going on, and
Yeah.
the blowback is coming, and
Yeah.
we're going to start feeling the pain here, not just at the pump, but we're going to have supply chain crises, and I wouldn't be surprised if they try to do another lockdown situation, but this time it's just because energy is so expensive. You have to stay home and work at home if you can. You're gonna have to do school from home if you can, just because we can't afford to send people to school on buses. We can't
I
afford to
agree.
have people run the car.
Jayme, you're right.
Yeah, I think that's going to come. I mean, we already had a test case to prove that we can do it. At least this time, you
COVID.
won't have to worry about 6 feet apart and wearing masks all the time. But it'll just be, well, it's just you're too poor to go anywhere. So I think that might be coming.
I think so. And what people should understand is we saw a little of this in the 70s. I remember these huge gas lines where you had to either have an even or odd license plate, or you can only go on a certain day. You were online for very long periods of time. There were caps. So we're going to see stuff like that. But the thing that people really need to understand is how this affects trucking. Okay, trucking is really affected, and if trucking is affected, that increases or restrains the whole food supply. Additionally, what people aren't hearing is that what also goes through the Straits of Hormuz is fertilizer. Okay, so no fertilizer, less crops, less productive crops. So that's another food shortage. So, with higher prices. And then the other thing is our energy costs are going to skyrocket because electricity is often made by burning fossil fuels. So the cost of electricity is going to go through the roof. So we're really talking some heavy stuff for the United States, which will do better than other developing countries that are really in the crosshairs and are going to be unable to get the energy they need at all. I mean, at least we'll have it. We'll just be paying 4 times what it's worth.
Yeah.
So,
Europe's going to get it worse than us.
One of the things I didn't get to say, but
please.
So much to say. Somebody told me, somebody who had worked in Oklahoma in oil companies, and he said, look, they will stop at nothing. They will stop at nothing to get the oil. That they'll overthrow, they'll assassinate, they'll get us involved in wars. Nothing will stop them. That's what he said. Look at what's going on now. I mean, maybe if there's enough opposition in the world, maybe, just maybe, it will be stopped when they start to see the damage. But I don't know. Jayme, you've looked very pensive and possibly depressed as we're talking. Is that how you're feeling? Pensive and depressed?
No. Well, yeah,
That's
it is
just
pretty
your
depressing. I
usual.
mean, yeah, they're not. Yeah, you're right. They will go at any cost. They don't seem to care about the fallout. I mean, the cost in human lives is nothing for them.
Yeah.
They have no regard for human life. They're these machines. I think the only way to confront them is to threaten their power through force. You need a mass mobilization. Once they start to feel the threat to their power and profits, that's the only thing they'll be responsive to. Any human appeal, these are not really human. I don't think they're part of the human race. I mean,
they're lizard people.
Well, you have what's his name, Peter Thiel, going around saying that the Antichrist is coming. I mean, literally, have you plugged into that?
Oh,
yeah. He's going around talking about the Antichrist. That the Antichrist is coming. Yeah, I mean, what a crazy world this is.
Soldiers are being indoctrinated by this.
Yeah,
the Armageddon, and they'll be saved. Yeah. Other people won't.
Yeah, they do have a problem because the soldiers don't want to fight, and there's a lot of soldiers who are refusing, or they're calling to these conscientious objector hotlines, and they're being flooded with phone calls, and that is a barrier because they would have gone forward with a ground invasion, I think, a long time ago, but they realized that that's something they can't really get away with politically. I mean, they're calculating.
They can't even get away with it physically.
Fallout. And so if there's a mass refusal and a refusal of the troops, that is very significant. If there's revolts in the military, because that's what ended the Vietnam, was ultimately the soldiers wouldn't fight anymore. There's a movie about that, Sir No Sir, the suppressed story of the GI movement to end the Vietnam War. And the soldiers just stopped following orders, and they started killing their officers.
That's
Yeah,
I
the
think that's the
fragments
I
clincher.
happened.
mean,
That's
and
the clincher.
unfortunately, yeah, these people are
And sabotage and
violent
sabotage.
maniacs, and so I think we might also, if things deteriorate economically in the U.S. the way you're describing, I think we'll start to see terrorism in the United States in the sense of physical, violent attacks on government officials or people who orchestrated these crimes, because they are hated among the public, and the public has no vehicle for affecting change. The Democratic Party is not a vehicle of change, as we've discussed on this program many times. And until new parties form, I mean, in American history, there were new parties. You had serious problem and corruption in the Gilded Age, and people formed new parties, the People's Party and the Socialist Party, and they were a vehicle of change. They got people into elected office. The Democratic Party had to recruit the leader of the Populist Party, William Jennings Bryan, who became the Democratic Party candidate in the 1896 election, and then he was appointed Secretary of State under Woodrow Wilson, and he tried to block the U.S. intervention in World War I, and they had him removed, but he got into a position of power, at least relative power. So, I mean, there were some avenues, but we don't have that now. The two parties are completely corrupt, and the third parties, as Gloria is an expert, have been infiltrated and rendered totally ineffective and incompetent by design, like the Green Party. So there's no avenue for change within any kind of legal system or peaceful way. So if the economy starts to really suffer, then I think we'll see more unrest. And I'm not the first to predict this. We will see more unrest within the United States and possible violence targeting these criminals who are orchestrating these wars. And then they may have to double down. It could get very ugly. But unless people can form new parties and find vehicles for transforming the system from within, because this system is heading towards catastrophe for everybody. I mean, it's been one injustice and horror after another, and now it's blowing back more and more, and it's becoming unsustainable for planet Earth. So
It's going to be
there's going to be a
global.
breaking point at some point. It's either going to result in a civil war or violent conflict here, unless there's mass numbers who can constructively develop new avenues for change, and such as new parties, new media. I think part of it is we need a complete transfer, new institution, new media institution, because the media has completely failed to report reality, and now people don't trust the media. They're turning to Twitter X, but that's not. It's unreliable. We need
Well,
credible.
you get a lot of
Professional.
noise.
We need professional news organizations, both print and TV, that could actually report reality and help educate. And then we need a complete rerouting of our education system. The education system has failed the public, has failed to educate them about American history, about these structural forces that Charlotte is pointing out that are driving us toward disaster. And an angry, ill-informed population is a dangerous one. There's an article in the New York Times this weekend about this extreme right-wing character in Florida who's getting a lot of support from Generation Z because they have no job. They have no prospect for the American dream, for home ownership, stable job, having kids where they can support the kids. They're living with roommates, and they're into their 30s, and they're angry. They see all these terrible wars, but they don't have a good understanding of the world. So this guy's like a fascist. He's stirring them up, and so we could have also a fascism, more overt fascism. I mean, Trump has fascist characteristics, and it's leaning in that direction. And then So an angry youth could be mobilized on behalf of a fascist movement if people are not properly educated. So we need efforts to transform the education system and develop alternative education and new party. If we want things to move more constructively, otherwise, yeah, it's just going to be, I think, a violent outcome here within the United States and more chaos around the world and cataclysm.
Well, two things that kind of jump out is I was, watching X, as I pretty much do. I think I have a slight addiction. And they had they had this guy on who is he designs bunkers, and he was being interviewed, and I forgot who was interviewing him. And they said, "Well, you really think these are for nuclear war?" And blah 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 blah. He said, "No, no, no. That could be a benefit, nuclear war, but most people want these bunkers because the social unrest is going to be so bad that you're going to want to go in a bunker to protect yourself from your neighbor, not from China, not from Russia, not from Iran, and not from a nuclear weapon, but from your neighbor because of the civil war aspects." And it's the frog in the water, and they're turning up the heat. And what's going to happen is, when all of a sudden food is too expensive, what do you think's going to happen? There's going to be more crime. There's going to be all kinds of problems when food is too expensive for people to get. And war games, if you study war games, which I have, and the war games are basically civil unrest and what to do. And if you look, all of these internment things for that are being constructed for illegal aliens, okay, are going to be for all kinds of people. And they are building these containment areas. So
Right.
that's something to focus on, folks. When they're building a lot of prisons and a lot of containment areas, you go, what is that for? And
There are protests, right? There are protests.
Yeah.
People are not, they don't want them built, which is a positive thing. What do you think of Jayme Raskin's idea of democracy summers? I think that's a good idea, because they're going out there and they're training people in what our democracy is, what it came from, and why we should fight for it. Yeah, it's helping the Democrats, but because of our awful education system, that is an alternative. And I kind of think it's a good one.
Well, we find that a lot of stuff which is why we got the name Uncontrolled Opposition. We find that a lot of things that sound good, like I believe the Green Party was one, you get into it and you find it's controlled opposition. There's, gates on it, and you can't go beyond this way or beyond that way. So basically it takes your umph and your fire, and then it lets you spin your wheels until you throw your hands up and go, I give up. So I every time I hear the word democracy, I always go, this could be another CIA covert action, because that's the word they love to use when they're going to overthrow something or they're going to contain something. So I don't know. I'm not that hopeful, folks. And how about these meteors? There's like 6 meteors shooting towards the Earth. It's crazy. It all over the world. I mean, like this is getting crazy, folks. What do you think of the meteors? I mean, there's one. My ex-husband. He watches the show. He's in Cleveland, Ohio. He heard it hit. His whole family heard it hit. These are meteorites.
Oh well.
I'm a little torn on the democracy thing, because on one hand, I feel like people need to know what our country's supposed to be, what a democracy is supposed to be, and how it's supposed to work. But they also need to be taught that we don't have one. That what we have is not a democracy. If we had a democracy right now, we would not be at war with Iran, because the majority of the people do not want to go to war with Iran. We don't have a democracy.
That's true, but I think in one way Trump has exposed all the weaknesses, some of the strengths, I mean, because he, with his advisors, of course, is targeting some of these institutions that have some kind of guardrails, okay, against the abuse of power. And we're learning about them. We may never have fully understood them before. So, yeah, we don't have, the Princeton study. Did you ever read that? It's very
Yeah.
depressing.
The
But
one where it's like, it doesn't matter how much you want something. If you're not rich, you're not going to get it. But if you're rich, you
yeah,
get it, even though
it's
everybody's
very
against it.
cynical.
Well, I
It's
like
cynical.
Trump's comment where he goes, "Well, they told me, my son-in-law told me." So basically, Trump is not getting military advice from our seasoned military professionals. He's getting it from real estate developers in his administration.
Well,
It's wacky, and he's admitting it. It's
he
crazy.
is. I mean, they're saying he is getting the advice, but he's ignoring the advice from the professionals and taking it from his
Well said.
like his family members and the sycophants and the real estate people, because they're telling him what he wants to hear, and the stuff that he needs to hear and listen to and pay attention to, he doesn't want to hear it and doesn't do anything with it. So
That's true.
I mean, that's one of the reasons I think Joe Kent just resigned, and why Tulsi Gabbard probably should as well. But
I heard on the news today that Kemp was being investigated before he resigned for leaking classified information. Did you hear that one? So there may be more to the Kemp story.
Yeah.
That could be that he saw it coming, so he got out. I don't know. I have no idea. But,
the reason I found that interesting was when the Trump administration started last year, they were saying he was put in place to keep an eye on Tulsi Gabbard to make sure she would stay in line with the Trump agenda.
Interesting, yeah.
Which is weird because he's the one resigning and she's sticking around and towing the line.
Whatever happened to her?
I think she just needs to keep the job to pay for her mortgage. But
it's really sad. And Jeremy, you could relate to that because she thought something wasn't right with this so-called civil war in Syria, and she wanted to go and talk to Assad about it. And I was watching that, and I thought, oh, she's kind of brave to do that. And of course, she got destroyed for doing it. And I suppose humiliation has a role in the way people are acting.
It's amazing
is another one.
How dare she exercise diplomacy when she's on the Foreign Relations Committee?
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely a traitor to America, somebody who's doing the job of diplomacy when they're in a role to do diplomacy.
The part that scares me about the Iron Fist, okay, is that they believe that they have socially engineered us to the point where they can do this. And, so we have to always be aware of these psyops and, a psyop of watching, the Palestinians get genocided. Every day we're seeing this horrible stuff. And now we're seeing this horrible stuff in the rest of the world. So, when we've discussed this from a psychological standpoint, it results in a numbness, and it makes people withdraw and become numb. So we're even easier to control. It gives the, well, why bother thing. And we really all need to fight against that feeling. The other thing is that are they getting the banking organized in such a way that they can really control us? Is this going to crash the economy so that we have to go to digital banking, so that we can get food rationing? So, sometimes these things have a hidden agenda that's even worse because, as I said, if you're taking off that velvet glove, you have to have some level of confidence that there's no way out, that people are in the jail cell and the door is shutting. Because if they didn't have that level of confidence, they wouldn't have advanced this, in my opinion. So, we just all need to stay aware. And then the other thing that we didn't really talk about, but we kind of hinted on, is this whole false flags. And Jeremy's an expert at false flags. Jeremy has written so much on false flags. It's really great. He knows every sign that can possibly happen. And it's very possible. Jayme, what do you think about a false flag?
It's very possible. It's possible at any time, but they've been using that as a strategy, and now if the war is unpopular, they're in a desperate position. They may try something dramatic to try and reverse public opinion. So I wouldn't put anything past them. And they're the greatest threat to American citizens is their own government. They talk about threats, but from Russia or China or Iran, although they admitted that Iran was not really a threat. But really, the threat is the U.S. government. They're the capitalists, the oil people, and they're the most ruthless, and they don't value human life, including the lives of Americans.
And there's a lot of people who think they've already done some false flags overseas. Like
well, there have been these shootings, suspicious shootings that have gone on here. We don't know the full story behind those shootings.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, but that's local. But I mean, some of the attacks that
if those are not
Iran says we didn't do those.
We had a guest who said that there was a manipulated attack on a Jewish community center in Washington, and that the victims may not have even existed. There was no evidence that they were real human beings. They had no family or friends came out. There was no record of their school. Right, Gloria?
Oh, yeah.
And somebody researched that. So
yeah, that was Celia Farber, who's a friend of the show. Yeah, she came on. She did a lot of research.
Yeah, we don't have the capacity to research all these events, but it's suspicious, right? When they go to war that day, there's a shooting in Austin, Texas. There's attacks on synagogues. Who's really behind that?
Let me share a little insight on all of that. I was in touch with a Lebanese friend, and I said, I want your reaction to these two events that happened that you're talking about, these terrorist attacks. What's your thought? And she said, oh yeah, Israel's probably behind it. And what she meant is this, and I learned this being in Lebanon. When I was there were frequent Israeli incursions into southern Lebanon, and the people had to fight back, and the Western media always always blamed the Arabs. Okay, and then what followed? This huge public relations effort on the part of AIPAC, etc. They go together. You attack an institution at a time when you're worried about support from the Jewish community. So if you do an attack, the next thing you've got to do is do this full range propaganda supporting Jews in Israel and so on. And I think people are catching on to Zionism. They really are. There's a good piece of Nation about that recently. But that's how it happens. As soon as it happened, you just can't help it. If you've been in that part of the region, you know how they operate. It's almost automatic.
Always blaming the victim.
The other thing that we talk about is this concept of the boogeyman enemy, and I think that's where you're going with that, Charlotte. If you want to control your own people, you have to have an enemy. So for the Israeli elite, or the elite to oppress the working class Israelis, they have to tell them, oh, we're saving you from the horrible Palestinians. So without us, you would just be terrible. So don't fight us. Don't ask for fair wages or housing or all kinds of things that you need as a working class. Just believe in us.
Governments have done that for eternity. They blame a foreign enemy. They play up the threat of a foreign enemy to divert any class conflict. It's a trick of governing that they've used in many countries for many years. So it's not unique, but they hammer the propaganda. Terrorist. I think they repeat that line so many times that unfortunately, a lot of Jewish people now equate any Palestinian with a terrorist. And that the same for a while. And I think in the United States, the propaganda is starting to wear thin. That's why this war is not popular at all. Yeah, for many years, and it worked right after 9/11. I mean, there was support, broad support for Afghanistan, even Iraq. I think I read that there was about 70, although there was a vocal opposition, but there was 70% supported it when the war broke out. That started to reduce over time. And I think as the threat of terrorism receded, because there haven't really been foreign Middle East terrorist attacks in the United States for years, and the Iraq war went so disastrously that the American public started to be more critical, and that propaganda doesn't work as much now.
Well, it
It
worked in
works in Israel
2022.
because the people have experienced terrorist attacks, and I think the people polls show that I think huge percent of Israel supported this war in Iran, and they have a hate-filled attitude. I know a lot of Israelis and in the Jewish community, and I'm disgusted by the attitude of a lot of people. They really hate Arabs, and they use open racism.
Well, we discuss brainwashing techniques, and Israel is great with brainwashing techniques. Generationally, they've been saying, "Oh, the Palestinians are going to kill you. We're going to
look,
kill
we
you.
do
They're
it
going
here
to
with
kill you."
Russia. The Russia propaganda has worked here. And a lot of liberals will say the most foulest thing about Russia. They'll blame them for many things that Russia didn't do, has proven not to have done, like the 26 election. Liberals will still say that Russia did that. And there's been a constant propaganda about Russia. So it's similar, I think. They use
Well,
the
the
same
other thing is
techniques in different countries.
you have to be in the Israeli army. It's required. So they even have that opportunity for even deeper brainwashing.
Yeah, and they attack leftists in Israel. It's moved to the far, far right. They used to have, social. A lot of the original Zionists were socialists, and they had the kibbutz ideal. But then they've had the propaganda attacking leftists. Because I did an article with Israeli conscientious objectors, and what they said was when they were in jail, they had to spend like 3 months in jail because they refused to go into the army. And this guy was talking about his experience. He said, in the jail, they said, "Oh, you're a leftist. You want to kill all the Jews." Like, I think they spread that idea that if you're a leftist, that you want all the Jews killed, and that you support terrorism. And now you even mention, the left with an Israeli, and they think you're a terrorist. They equate terrorism with the left. And that the extreme right has taken over. It's a very scary society, and they're inviting their own destruction. And that's what Noam Chomsky wrote a good book years ago, Fateful Triangle, and that was his argument. People tried to attack him as an anti-Semite, but his argument was that the Jews were inviting their own destruction through this push for what Charlotte was describing, the Greater Israel, and this racist contempt for Arabs and Palestinians. It would blow back on the Jewish people, and that was his core analysis, and it's come to fruition, unfortunately. Well,
I'd like to end the show on a positive note. What do we do? Okay, everyone's like, "Well, what do we do?" What do we do is we maintain our friendships. We maintain our relationships with our loved ones. We don't fight with them. We look for ways that people can coexist, what we agree on, and we focus on what we agree on, not what we don't agree on, and love each other. And keep your sense of humor. Find things to laugh at. No matter how it gets, just find things to laugh at. The other thing is what we're doing here is so valuable for all of us personally. I feel better talking to Jeremy. I feel better talking to Charlotte. I feel better talking to Jayme. Talk to people. Talk about what's going on and how you feel. And if somebody disagrees with you, don't write them out of your life and no contact with people. This is what the predator class wants. So love each other and talk and laugh and we'll get through this, guys. We'll get through this.
Education is important as an antidote to racism or these hate-filled views that I was describing. It's important to have a good education system where youth learn, and a point Charlotte was making, if we have better understanding of the Middle Eastern countries, or Russia, or South American countries. So we need to focus on developing a better education system in the United States for the next generations, and to fighting against this censorship and McCarthyism. I think that's one important thing. And I think trying to build new political organizations that are not infiltrated, because I think if you look at American history, those independent parties did have an impact in the Gilded Age, progressive era. There were a lot of improvement, especially as far as labor rights. So, now I think we have to try and build new parties, and that will take a strong effort. Instead of, I think part of the problem is people rant on Twitter or Facebook. We need to organize in our community and start to build new political structures.
Well,
That's
one
my
of the
opinion.
things
We need to rebuild our
that
communities.
that Scott Ritter had mentioned on our last show, which I think got cut because it was, at the end, was, he was talking about why don't we have a anti-war or peace rally in Central Park on June 20th at 3 p.m. And I think that's,
Yeah.
a very good goal
Yeah.
is just to let's at least, whether
And
or
that
not we
brings
can.
people together, it sends a message, and people start to network, and they can, stay in touch and build these kind of new organizations that we need, whether it's education, whether it's new political organizations, new media networks.
My only
etc.
criticism of that idea is that it's 3 months away. It might be too late. We should have been talking about March 20th, not June 20th. But
Let me just add a little thing about the evangelicals who are Trump's base. They're still staying loyal to him. And as you guys know, Jerry Colby and I wrote a book, Thy Will Be Done, The Conquest of the Amazon, Nelson Rockefeller, and Evangelism in the Age of Oil. They've been used. The thing about the evangelicals that we learned is that if you have a problem with your organization, and you leave, you are shunned. The consequences of turning on the evangelical leaders are big for a lot of people. So they don't leave, they stay loyal. And I think that's a big problem that we have here, because they are very involved in Israel, as you all know. And well, they've just been used left and right. They pacify resistance using the Bible, and in very sophisticated ways in some cases. So that's another thing to watch out for. It's the evangelicals.
And
yeah,
I guess the last thing is if something terrible happens, take a breath and don't react. Think about it. You don't be, ready to do something. Just think about it. Don't, with these false flags in particular.
I believe
Yeah.
Chris Hezridge wrote a book about that as well. The
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah, the
evangelicals.
Christian fascists. Yeah,
the
that
Christian
that that is a
fascism.
big problem. But yeah, again, I think there is cause for optimism is that the public opinion has shifted, and the public is not overwhelmingly supporting this war in Iran. That even they
That's good.
voted for Trump because he said that he would end all the, start not start any new wars. And now they feel betrayed, and they're very angry. A lot of the MAGA people are very, very angry with Trump, and they're supporting figures like Tucker Carlson, who, although I don't agree with his overall worldview, but he's come out very progressively on criticizing American foreign wars and foreign intervention. So I think there is
and he's being
opportunity
rewarded
for,
with death threats. I don't know if you've
yeah,
been
but I
hearing
think
that.
there's
Rewarded with prison.
opportunity for organizing.
Right.
The kind of idea that I'm talking about. Developing new parties, new institute, reforming education, reforming. I think there's opportunity for political organizing, and the public mood is somewhat like in the Vietnam era and its aftermath, with a lot of cynicism, and that could be used. That could be developed into something positive. The danger is that these demagogues of the far right will get to these angry young people, or critical people, and steer them into fascistic direction. So that's why progressives need to step up.
That sounds an awful
And they
lot like
shouldn't write off people in the South or in the conservative area of the country, in the oil belt, because they're the attitude. I live in Oklahoma, and attitude of people is very critical of the government at this time, and even the oil industry and its control over things. So I think there are opportunities.
It sounds
There's
like you're
gotta
describing
be.
Turning Point USA. Like that's what's happening with them right now, steering young people in that direction.
Yeah, but I think progressive need to. The conservatives have always been very effective. In part, they have big money getting youth. They have a youth movement. They have these groups like Turning Point. The left has to develop their own groups like that can reach people in the heartland of America. Because there is a crossover. A lot of the messaging now is kind of anti-war, and it's not that different from the messaging of progressive movement. But there are some dangerous ideas, I think, that
You know
they
what I'm
promote
not hearing?
too
I'm not
aggressively.
hearing the environmentalists going nuts about the gas and oil fires and all of the stuff. Where are the environmentalists? Why aren't they chaining themselves to a painting right now? I mean, come on, guys. It's not short of showers and turn off the lights when you leave the room that we have a problem. It's the military industrial complex blowing up the planet. So let's have some environmental activism, actually do something for a change. So it's crazy.
I
Okay.
think that many of them are just aghast. I mean, beginning with Trump, going after all these alternative energy projects and cutting them left and right. I mean, it's hard for them. I know somebody who works with them, and it's very demoralizing. But what's going on in the Gulf is appalling. And all that black smoke going up and coming down on
that's
the
not good. That's not good.
Okay,
That's
well, I
why
gotta
All
run.
right, yeah.
I put it up online, so great to be
Okay.
with you, Charlotte.
Yeah,
And let's
Charlotte,
keep in
thanks
touch.
for a
Bye.
lovely time and everybody.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Yep. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up. And thanks to Jayme. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, Gloria. This has been
Love your
Uncontrolled
pets.
Opposition. Oh, you got a
Aw.
kitty.
Aw. See, that's we need love. We need love.
Yeah,
That's what's gonna get us through this. Loving everybody, loving our pets, loving our family, loving our friends, loving our neighbor, loving our communities. This is what's gonna get us through, folks.
And on my Twitter page, I have my pinned tweet says, how do you get by knowing watching America crumble all around you? And it says memes. You post memes, they turn your bad feelings into good feelings. So yeah, we got to do stuff like that. And love your neighbors, love your cats, love your dogs. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. This has been Uncontrolled Opposition. I want to thank Craig Pasta Jardula as the executive producer of this show, and giving us a platform to be on YouTube so we can show the show to you live every week. And we'll be back next week with another episode. Have a good weekend, and try to check out from this information, watch something fun for a little bit, and then come back to it later. All right, have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye.